So my name is Cheryl Sheraton, and I work for an organization called Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. So we operate across 10 countries, and we basically make all of the Coca-Cola products within those 10 countries. And what I'd love to share with you is a little bit about our story, but also how we build capability in our organization, especially how we make 70-20-10 work for us. Part of our complexity is that we cannot always afford to bring people in from all of the areas within which we trade, to bring them into a central point in order to facilitate learning. And also, we need to make sure that learning is very practical and it can be applied on the job. So 70-20-10 is what works for us. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our story. So currently, who we are currently the number one, we hold the number one market position across most of the territories in which we operate. We are currently the number one bottler in Africa, and we are the 7th largest bottler globally for the Coca-Cola system. We have approximately 15,000 committed, passionate employees. We service over 500,000 customers, and then we have more than 30 bottling plants within our territories. We have 2 shareholders. The Coca-Cola Company currently is the majority shareholder at 65%, and then we have the Gucci family. But we have a very interesting story, because this is not what we look like, and we're just over 18 months old. So we're a very new organization. These are the territories in which we currently operate. So we are in South Africa, Uganda, Mozambique, Kenya, Namibia, Ghana, Tanzania, Ethiopia, in Mayotte, and Comores. The products you know, these are the products we all know and love. And we know we have some of the challenges around sugar in our products, and we're working on new formulations, lots of formulations, to make sure that our consumers have choices, and it's going very successfully. So this is a little bit about our journey. So in November 2014, there is an announcement that we're going to have a merger, and there's going to be an organization called Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. And it was basically 3 organizations that came together. It was the Coca-Cola Company that put 2 or 3 businesses on the table. And then I don't know if any of you are familiar with SAB Miller as a company. They were a beer company. They were the 2nd biggest brewer in the world. SAB Miller put 2 entities on the table. And then the Gucci family. So we had those 3 shareholders. And we just about announced that these 3 shareholders were going to come together and form this new bottler, when in September 2015, SAB Miller then gets acquired by the biggest brewer in the world, acquires the 2nd biggest brewer in the world. So we were then owned by AB InBev, Coca-Cola, and the Gucci family. Where we are now, you can see quite a bit of journey, is that we currently now have closed the deal where Coca-Cola has bought us out from AB InBev. We're now owned by Coca-Cola and the Gucci family. And where we are going to be in October this year, we do not know. We are being floated at the moment for sale. So it's an exciting journey. There's nobody who can buy any MBA experience anywhere in the world to learn what we've just gone through, to have so many different owners in such a short period of time, and the types of challenges that we've overcome and the types of things that we've learned. So we're very excited in terms of our journey. Then what we also know is that from a growth rate perspective, we know that there's huge opportunity in Africa. So based on the International Monetary Fund, Sub-Saharan Africa is growing ahead of the global rates. So as an organization, irrespective of what's happening with shareholder and ownership, we know the opportunities are there, and that's what we focus on. And then our ambition is to create the best Coca-Cola bottler in the world and to become Africa's most valuable food and beverage company. So we're not limiting ourselves to just the Coca-Cola product, we're expanding our options. So what does this mean for learning? We need to meta. Now meta is the model that we've adopted that we believe is going to help us merge 6 entities. So we have 6 business models, 6 sets of values and systems that have come together, and we need to merge it. And then we need to get ourselves ready to acquire new businesses. So currently we're running in about 10 countries. Our ambition is to go beyond 40, and this within a 3 to 5 year time frame. So it's not an easy task that we've set ourselves. So what is meta? So we know as an organization that we need to mobilize our workforce and our system faster than any competitor can mobilize. We also know that we need to execute better than any of our competitors. And then we know that we must be able to transform our organization ahead of any of our competitors, and we must do so with agility. So out of all of the models that we've researched to say what is going to help us achieve our ambition, this is the one that we've chosen. For those of you interested, it is part of the Heidrick and Struggles organization, extensive research, and we felt that this is going to work for us. So it's called Accelerating Performance through Meta. Now, what does that mean for us from a learning perspective? If we want to be able to mobilize, execute, and transform our organization with agility, we need learning agility. We need every single person to learn every single day. So we know that we must systematically learn from our mistakes, and we must be comfortable with failing fast, with confidence. We also know that we must implement rituals for regular learning and adapting. We can't leave learning to osmosis. We have to be very deliberate in how we want to learn. And we also know that we have to live on the learning edge, which means we constantly push our employees to continue to learn. And with that as a mandate, we asked ourselves, so how do we design development in our organization? And we've gone with 3 principles, only 3. The first one is development must be employee-owned and leader-led. So development, learning and development is not owned by HR. It's not owned by the training team. It is owned by the employee and led by the leader. The second principle is that we have to follow the 70-20-10 model. It is the best way for adults to learn, and it is the most successful way in which the types of skills that we need, the practical, executable skills, that's the best model for us to follow. And then the last principle is that development and learning is continuous and it is agile. So as things change in our territories, we must be able to very quickly pick up what is changing, and we must be able to respond. And then we also know that from a competence perspective, we have 4 phases within the life cycle of our employees. The first phase is the onboarding phase. So our mandate is, how do you onboard people as quickly as possible so that they can get to competence and start performing? Then we go into what we call our core competence phase, which is our longest phase from an employee's life cycle in a particular role. We then try to shift as many people as possible into what we call the high performance phase. So we make sure that people understand the standard, and then we encourage them to exceed the standard all the time. And then we know that there will always be a group of high potential individuals that we can take to the fourth phase of learning, and that's where we do growth and innovation. And those are the people we put our energies behind because they literally drag the whole organization forward. So with these three principles in mind and these phases of competence, we then asked ourselves, okay, so we're going to adopt 70-20-10. And we've got quite a few solutions that we're putting in mind. But what we also do is we went to go and find out how well is 70-20-10 working. Okay, so pretty interesting information around the fact that 70-20-10 is failing. And we reviewed this, and some of the information that we know is if we expect our employees to be able to train on the job, we have to provide resources that they can access very quickly. But remember that first principle around employees, development is employee owned. It means whatever resources we design, an employee must be able to pick it up and run with that learning resource. A line manager must be able to have the development conversation and not be dependent on HR. So that's part of our challenge. We also know that micro-learning is critical in our business. Our line managers have said to us they cannot always release people for long periods of learning. So please can you put it into micro-learning for us so that we can fit it into our schedule. And then part of what the video is telling us is that 87% of the workers are rating knowledge sharing within their teams as being one of the areas where they learn the most. They're also saying 79% says general conversations and meetings help me learn. 75% are saying personal and professional networks and communities. So what that means for us is how do we as an organization enable knowledge sharing within our teams, and you'll see how we build teams. How do we allow for meetings not just to be information sharing, but for it to become a learning space? And then how do we look at internal communities? We obviously encourage external, but how do we build communities internally in our organization? In terms of maximizing the 20%, what the research is showing us, you have to invest in social learning. We can all learn individually, but then we only learn at our own pace. But when we learn with others, it accelerates learning. So how do we do that? How do we create mentoring programs? How do we train line managers in coaching? And then also provide access to senior staff. So I'll share with you some of the things that we do as an organization. And what the research is saying is that if you want 70-20-10 to work, you have to have resources, you have to have learning structures, and you must have support for learning. So bearing all of that in mind, we then asked ourselves, so how do we make this? So what we do know is the 10% is predominantly training, and you're going to get 10% of the value out of that. But if you want to focus on 70 and 20, coaching and mentoring structures and coaching and mentoring skills are critical. And that's where we invest our time as an organization. We also make sure that learning has meaning. It's not just a tick box exercise. It adds value to my life. And one of the ways in which we do that is we integrate learning and performance. So we don't separate those items. We integrate practically everything that we do. If we have a communication infrastructure, learning sits inside the communication infrastructure, performance sits inside it. So we don't operate in silos. So let me give you an idea of how we integrate business performance. So this is a standard process that we would normally start with business planning in our organization. We then go into goal setting. So once there's a mandate to say, let me say, for example, go and chase this volume for us. We then do what we call team goals, because work is done in teams, not by individuals. Once we have team goals, we then assign responsibility within that team. So you would either have an A for accountability or an S for support. You then take that and you design individual goals. So we always have two types of goals. The team has a goal to go and chase work, and individuals have a goal to contribute towards the team's success. Then in terms of monitoring, and this is probably our most critical step, is we have what we call one-on-ones, especially for people managers and above. We do one-on-one conversations, and then we also pay a lot of attention to team meetings, because we found we waste a lot of time in team meetings. It's just a talk shop. So we dedicate time into making sure that those meetings are effective. Then we also have, as per normal, performance and development reviews. In some organizations, it's mainly performance. We integrate it. When you talk about performance, you talk about how people are growing also. So from a goal-setting perspective, when we talk goals, which is what we expect people to do, we also talk development, which is how am I going to help you? And this is owned by the line manager. It's not owned by HR. So as a line manager, you sit down with your team, you agree team goals. Everybody goes back, designs their own individual goals, comes back to the line manager, and then you say, okay, so let's talk now in terms of your individual contribution. And we do two types of goals also. We do performance goals, which is what you must drive from a KPI or measure perspective. And we also do a development goal. So it is expected of all of us to continually invest in ourselves in order to grow. It is integrated. It's not just what you do for us, but how we're going to help you to do it even better. From a one-on-ones perspective, we track our goals when we do one-on-one, but we also talk development. And there's a particular coaching model. Our one-on-ones are designed around the GROW coaching model. Is anybody familiar with GROW? It's quite a popular model. So it just talks about, so what's the goal that we want to achieve? What's your reality right now? What sort of options do you think we have? And what's the way forward, or your will to action? And the one-on-ones are designed around GROW. It's a coaching conversation. It's not about catching people doing things wrong. It's about enabling people to do things right. Then from a performance perspective, I mentioned already, it is PDR. So you have one conversation around performance and development, and it continuously integrates. If we have people who are struggling with performance, the question that comes to the line manager is, what development have you put into place to help with performance? So our perspective is always enabling as opposed to managing. So what does that mean for us as an organization? We've got 4 elements that we look at when we build our learning and development framework. We look at what we call leadership competence as well as functional competence. And generally, the functional competence is what you do. The leadership competence is how you do it. And what we know, in order for us to be sustainable as an organization, the how is more important than the what. It's easy to train the what. It is more difficult to train the how. So we literally train the how, and we integrate it into all our feedback mechanisms to ensure that we are sustainable as an organization. Then we make sure that individuals have personal mastery. They can do their jobs and they can do it very well. But we also make sure that you can operate within a team, because work is done in teams, not in individuals anymore. Work has become too complex. And then we link everything to career development so that we can retain skills as long as possible. We know that we're dealing with a generation that has a different value system, and we are very comfortable when people leave us and they find their way back to us. We just try to keep them as long as possible in our organization. Some of these solutions I'm going to go into a little bit later. So I just needed you to understand these are the 4 elements that we focus on when we do learning and development. And I just wanted to pause here because I think it was Nathan who spoke about the socio-political context in which learning takes place. This for us is our empowerment model. If we want employees to own learning and we want leaders to lead learning, we have to allow for power to be shared across our organization. So from an empowerment perspective, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is everybody willing to do what they need to do from a performance perspective as well as development perspective? Then is everybody able to do what they do? And our mandate in learning and development is make sure that everybody is able. Then the third question we ask is, do people feel allowed to do what they want to do? So if you want learning to be owned by an employee, does an employee feel that I'm allowed to ask my manager for this type of learning or this opportunity? So in order to make sure that people feel allowed to do stuff, we work very hard on the attitudes of managers to release control. And there will always be governance. There's always a framework in which you operate. But you can release control so that people can then ask questions. We also check in terms of decision-making authority, and we try to allow power to make decisions closest to where the work must be done. So if you have a bureaucratic organization, you'll find that decision-making escalates. That means it slows you down. So try to bring the decision point closest to where the work must be done. And then also make sure that people have access to the decision makers so that work can continue a lot quicker. Then from an accountability perspective, if we're going to allow people to make decisions and to learn, we then hold people accountable. And that gets integrated into our performance management process. And then what we also know is that if we want to build a learning organization, we need an ecosystem in our organization. And we're very deliberate around what our learning ecosystem needs to look. So the biggest player in our learning ecosystem is the line manager. That's the person who knows that team the best. They spend the most time with that person. They have more than likely come through the ranks. They understand all of those challenges, and they should be most invested in the success of that team. And we ask of our line managers, we ask 3 things. You must be able to facilitate performance and facilitate learning. You must be able to coach for performance and coach for learning. And you must be able to assess performance and assess learning. So we ask for 3 things of our line managers. Then we have a team of subject matter experts as well as the learning and development community. And these experts know that their job is to make the line manager successful. Wherever they find themselves, the line manager is their customer. Make sure that that person is successful. In addition, from a structure perspective, we also have centers of excellence like most organizations have. And then we have what we call communities of practice. And these are communities of best practice that we go and find wherever they are, even if they are in the warehouse and they have the best picking accuracy, we go and find them. And then we make sure that we share this information across the system so that people can go and learn from the best. In addition, we have learning content, and I'm going to go into learning content a little bit later. And then we have a very strong coaching culture, because you cannot learn if you cannot coach people. That's one of our most critical skills. And like most organizations, we have a learning management system and we play on digital platforms. So from a subject matter expert, some of us mentioned it during the day, peer learning for us is a critical enabler. The people who do the job are probably the best people to learn from, because especially if they do the job well. So we focus on peer learning in our organization. Then we have technical trainers and coaches, we have experts, we have line managers who are capability leaders, and we have L&D. You'll see that most of the learning is not owned by HR, it's owned by the rest of the organization. From a center of excellence and a community of practice perspective, I mentioned earlier, we always look for teams that have taken a process to the next level, and we share that widely. And then we look for a collection of teams that have taken an entire system to the next level. And then we share that widely for learning. So I mentioned earlier that there are only 3 things that we need a line manager to be able to do. So here are some of the solutions that we use to build this capability. So from a facilitation perspective, one of the questions I get asked is, how do you help a line manager facilitate learning when they are so busy? And learning sometimes is quite a complex experience to navigate. We focus very much on learning guides, and we keep those guides as simple as possible. We take the complexity into the instructional design process, and then we give the line manager a very simple tool that they can use. Lots of one-point lessons with lots of pictures, so we use storyboarding quite effectively. Anytime we have something new, we use storyboarding to launch it. We do what we call micro-learning toolkits. I'll give you an example of how we do these micro-learning toolkits. And then we also have what we call facilitator guides, and I'll show you what we do there. Most importantly is the line managers are included in the design phase of the learning solution, and they sign it off, not HR. So the line managers will give us the mandate. We will take them through a thinking process, through questioning. They then participate in the design phase and they sign that solution off because they know best what they need. And then we obviously do training also. From a coaching perspective, we focus on building a coaching culture, not just coaching competence. So culture goes beyond just being able to coach. It means that we do coaching in every single conversation. Even when we go and talk to our customers, we are aware of coaching skills. Even when we partner with government, we are aware of our coaching skills because it's about collaborating and finding joint solutions. Then we integrate coaching into every single performance, every management conversation, and we focus a lot on self-awareness in our business because leadership competence is critical. So once you know yourself and then you understand others, it just makes learning a lot easier. From an assessment perspective, the assessment gets integrated into the learning guides. And remember I said we take the complexity into our world around instructional design or designing assessment processes. When the line manager gets that guide, it has been simplified for him. All he needs to do is ask the questions within the guide. We look for 3 types of competence in our organization. Remember I said to you that we've got 4 phases. The one is onboarding, so we need to get people to do stuff quickly. The second one is core competence, so that's where you do your job at the standard we set for you. The third one is high performance. So this is how we drive high performance. So when we look for competence and we assess competence, we ask, can the person do the job? That's practical competence. Then we ask the second question, do you know why you are doing it the way that you are doing? And that's very important for us because once people know why, we don't have to push people to do stuff. They appreciate what it is, they gather their own momentum, and they operate independently. And then the last one is what we call reflective competence, and that's the what if. So because we are preparing our organization to deliver now, but also deliver for the future, we ask them the question, what if things change? What if you have currency devaluation and you must now run that business plan? How do you deal with it now? So we ask those 3 questions to make sure that people can practically do what they need to do. They know why it's important, and they can reflect on how to apply this learning when my situation changes. And then we use various methods of assessments. We do lots of questions, lots of observation, and then we do evaluate documents also in terms of our process. And what we also add to make sure that our people are competent, our line managers, we have various learning academies. And that's where we look at all of the learning they need to do and how do we start boxing that learning together. It could be anything between 5 to 7 days that we put people into a learning space and we accelerate their learning. Then we looked at our subject matter experts and our L&D community, and we asked ourselves, now what must they do to be able to run this ecosystem? And we found they need the same skills. They just need it at a higher level of complexity. So there was nothing different there. We also have learning academies for these roles. And then similarly, from a COE perspective, the communities of best practice, same skills, nothing different. The only difference is they don't have learning academies. So that's basically how we enable 3 of our skills. So let me pause here and check if there are any questions before I move on to the practical solutions that we use. No questions? Yes? At the moment, most of it is face-to-face. Our digital platforms, I'll show you an example of how we're starting to use WhatsApp. We're also starting to use video conferencing now, and teleconferencing we also use. But most of it is face-to-face because our line managers have to be in the world of their team. So even if they have 10 people in their team across various territories, they have to make sure that they see their team member regularly. So they understand the principle of managing by walking around.
Thank you. It's very interesting to learn Coca-Cola Africa's experience. My question is maybe, I see you as HR presenting. So what is different here? What is different in other Coca-Colas? So do you have any assessment of the results that your team, 15,000 employees, are doing better than you?
Yes. What I can say to you in terms of the primary difference is that we have lots of solutions at the lowest level of our organization that enables the 70%. What we find when we speak to other bottlers is they have lots of solutions at the top level of the organization to enable but not as many to enable the employee competence. So that would be the most significant difference.
On the business end, what happened? So what is different Coca-Cola Africa with Coca-Cola West Africa or Coca-Cola North Africa? What did you observe and did you measure that?
We haven't measured it as yet. We're still very new as an organization. So we're rolling out quite a few solutions and we are tracking them at the moment. Okay, so we apply to all levels unless there's a complex skill. So if the skill is a lot more complex, then we obviously increase the classroom time. Or if someone is new in their role, we find we invest more from a 10%, so then it increases, and eventually we move back into the 70-20-10 model. So it's got to do with what is the foundational competence and what do you need at that point in time to accelerate learning.
Yes, the first thing is I'm very good to see what you're presenting next, but I already know you're doing a good job because driving in from the airport, the marketplace was covered with Coca-Cola sign. There's Coca-Cola water in my hotel room. So you guys are doing it. You guys are high-performing organizations. But my question was about leadership development, and I didn't see that. So I wondered how you work. Is there another part of the organization that focuses on leadership? How you sort of integrate that into people's learning and development, so how they grow as leaders?
So from a leadership development perspective, we integrate leadership into everything we do. So if we run an academy, which is a functional academy, so let's say you are a sales manager, and we're going to put you through a sales manager academy. It is both your functional knowledge as well as your leadership knowledge integrated, because when you perform, you don't separate the two. You apply your functional knowledge and you lead the way that you interact with people. So we integrate leadership into everything we do. Then there are certain leadership skills like coaching, where we will do a separate intervention. And then there would be team building from a leadership perspective. That would be a separate intervention. One example of what we do with new leaders, if we find that we have new leaders going into an existing team, we introduce a process called leader assimilation. So what we need to do is to make sure that that leader connects with that team as quickly as possible, so that performance and learning can take place. So we literally facilitate that assimilation of the leader in the team. Other than that, leadership is integrated into all our conversations. Okay, so these are just some of the learning solutions I thought I would share with you today, and please feel free to ask me about any other solutions. So we have what we call a learning pathway. So we look at our most critical roles, and our most critical roles will be any role that touches the customer, like a sales role, is critical. And any role where you have lots of people in is critical. We need to make sure that people learn fast there. Then we have what we call a role guide, and that's for onboarding, and you'll see some of the detail there. We have toolkits. I'll show you some there. The CAP guide is probably, it's our most extensive solution, but it is our most complex solution. But we found a way, it's been around in our organization for more than 20 years, and we found a way to make this work for us. And CAP stands for Competency Acquisition Process. So it is the process through which we acquire competence within our organization. And then we have learning academies. So here's an example of a learning pathway that we will design. It's on one page. This is for an account manager. And you'll see, we talk about the key behaviors that we need for the account manager. We're looking at about 9 months in the job. We're saying within 9 months, you should be able to have learned for your core competence. We then take you up from a shadow guide, your onboarding process, your basic practices, into an academy. And then we also carry on with immersion programs, and we carry on with CAP. You'll see that CAP sits in every single critical role in our organization. And if you remember that first principle where we said development is employee-owned and leader-led. So we designed this so that employee can pick up this one page and know exactly what they must learn, when they must learn it, and they can have the conversation with their line manager to say, I'm ready for more learning. From a role guide perspective, I'm going to give you the example of what we're running in Ethiopia. You'll see we always start with a business objective. What must you go and fetch in your role? Because learning must have meaning. So we never separate learning from performance. And you'll see they're chasing 60 million unit cases within Ethiopia. They're chasing a 55% market share, and they're chasing a 57% execution score. In a role guide, we have the most important work practices, the most important processes, and your most important routines. So imagine you're new to our business. You've just started as a customer sales representative. you don't know our company, you don't know our products, we give you this guide to say, do these practices, do these processes, and follow these routines. So you know exactly what's expected of you, and then you generally get someone that coaches you. Your body always coaches you. So here's an example of some of the practices that we would give. I know you can't read them. Some of the routines that we would use. And you'll see that we started with the business imperatives and we end with business imperatives also. So we say just 3 high payoff activities if you want to make sure that you sell, make sure that your product is always available, make sure that you keep it cold, and make sure that you activate to plan. So we always integrate performance and learning in our organization. So then from a toolkit perspective, I said I'd share with you what we normally put in our toolkits. So this is a toolkit around governance. We had a bit of a problem in our organization, making sure that there's standardization and there's governance. So we would normally give a line manager, and by the way, the line manager does this training on their own, wherever they are with their teams. We would give them presentations, videos, motion graphics, lots of YouTube clips. We would also give them a facilitator guide, conversation cards, so that they can have lots of conversations with their teams around a particular topic. And we also build in games so that learning remains fun. And it also gives the line manager an opportunity to build teams. So here's an example of a facilitator guide. So these are the slides. We give them their notes of what they need to be able to say against that slide. And we give them an opportunity for additional notes. And the line managers run with this. We don't need to get involved at all from an HR perspective. Then this is probably our most widely used tool. And it's probably the most complex from an instructional design perspective. But I want you to imagine that you take one job. Let's say we take the job of a sales manager. And we look at what sort of units of work is sitting in that sales manager's job. Then we look at the outcome of learning. So we do not measure input of learning. We measure the outcome, which is the behavior. We then guide the line manager on how to assess this learning. And then we also add learning resources. All of this goes into one guide. And this is basically what the guide looks like. And a job could easily have 40 to 50 pages in one guide. And generally, when we introduce the 40 to 50 pages for one job, we get a shock in the system. And then we help them demystify it. And we say, if you've got 60 pages, you've got 12 months, it's about 5 pages a month. You've got 4 weeks, it's about 1 page a week. It's not that complex because our idea is for you to learn every single day, and we guide you on exactly what you need to do. So we have unit standards, specific outcomes. We have the criteria against which you will be assessed, your learning method, assessor notes, quite a bit of information. And as a line manager, you don't even need to think. All you need to do as a line manager is ask these questions. All you need to do as an employee is be able to answer these questions. And this is our most extensive learning solution. It's been around in our system for more than 20 years already. And when we merged our 6 organizations, our line managers asked for one thing only, and they said, bring CAP. That's all we want, just bring CAP to us, because it sets the standard and it guides learning. Okay, so let me skip the Learning Academy because I am out of time, but I do, if it's okay, I just wanted to end off with what works for us as an organization. So what works for us is the person who owns the problem is the best person to solve the problem. So we never do top down. We always find where the problem is, we find out who owns that problem, and then we work with those teams to solve the problem. What also works for us is we design learning through the eyes of the customer. So we always find out that if we're going to train this team, who is going to receive their service, and we would go to the customer and design the learning solution backwards. Then from a learning perspective, we always appreciate the effort of learning, but we reward the outcome. We don't reward learning itself. We appreciate learning, but we reward performance. And then learning, as I said earlier, is always integrated into everything we do. If we are preparing a communication, learning is inside of it. If we are running a meeting, learning is inside of it. If we're going to be visiting a plant, learning is inside of everything that we do. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for your attention. That's our story.